of course, you have the bases here. The Americans have the capability to react because they have a base from which they could operate. You have then Clark Air Base and Subic Naval Base. So the Mutual Defense Treaty simply assured us that American forces here would respond just in case you have an armed attack against the Philippines. Now we don't have them. And of course, this decision, sovereign decision of the Philippine Senate in September 1991 that we don't want American bases here. So it's basically raising the point. What's the point of asking the Americans for stronger security guarantee if we have deprived the Americans of facilities from which they could operate to assist, provide assistance to the Philippine forces just in case you have an armed aggression in the South China Sea?
Okay, so we have a curious condition wherein two separate senior officials of the same government take on two different positions on a very sensitive issue.
Yes.
So what can you say about this? And where do you think President Duterte is right
according
now?
To Secretary Locsin, this is an example of a big brain. The government has a big brain. From my take, this is a classic example of what you call politics within government. One government agency disagreeing with one another. And I think President Duterte is encouraging this, that you have a lively discussion on an issue that has something to do with, prime most important, Philippine national security in the 21st century.
But where do you think he stands right now? Can you read? Can we read?
First of all, of course, yung initial statements niya, around 2016, he was not very happy with our security relations with the United States. In fact, he even announced in Beijing in 2016 that, I'm separating from the United States, Russia and China, here I come. In fact, I think he was really bent on unilaterally abrogating the Mutual Defense Treaty and doing away with the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. I think that the military stepped in. The military asked him. Yeah, we still need this alliance because we are, we rely on the United States for logistics, for ammunition, and it's too early to basically cut a deal with, of course, the third party, that's China. So I think the position of the president is giving them leeway. Both the Secretary of Foreign Affairs and, of course, the Secretary of National Defense to basically discuss and, of course, engage in a lively discourse on how we would have to proceed with our security relations with the United States.
Okay, but if I ask you this question directly, what's your position? Maintain it, strengthen it, or scrap it?
I think we have to maintain it, but in a way, amend it in the light of the changes in the 21st century. What are the changes? Again, this is what I mentioned. China's effort to effect a control of the South China Sea is not being done through really armed aggression. It is the use of what you call, again, this is I mentioned earlier, gray zone tactics, like the use of fishermen, the use of the Coast Guard, building up artificial islands and putting forces. Those are what you call measures short of war. So they don't really constitute armed attack. So probably both the Philippines and the United States would have to discuss how do we deal with China's gray zone tactics.
We will discuss more the different issues surrounding the Mutual Defense Treaty, whether we maintain it, we strengthen it, or scrap it, when Asean in Focus returns.
When visiting the Philippines, Manila or Quezon City is a popular destination. But oftentimes, the hustle and bustle of the city can be more stressful on your vacation. So when you feel the need to reconnect to nature or relax again, there's a beautiful oasis just outside of the city called the Garden at Ciudad de Victoria. species that you can see here include hydrangea, snapdragon, and stargazers. They're truly beautiful. The gardens at Ciudad de Victoria are so peaceful, tranquil, and beautiful that it's become a haven for young couples and a very popular venue for engagement photos. The next time you want an escape from the big city, the garden at Ciudad de Victoria is a wonderful place to visit.
Welcome back to Asean in Focus, and we continue our interview with Dr. Rene De Castro, Professor for International Studies of the De La Salle University in Manila. Okay, earlier we talked about the Lorenzana position, the Teodoro Locsin position, and of course the position of the President where he's in right now. What about Congress, both Senate and the lower house?
I think Congress has been sidelined.
Okay.
By the position of the Duterte administration, that foreign policy is the sole prerogative of the executive. That has been the position of President Duterte, even during the early part of his term, when Senate was wanted a review of his earlier policy. He indicated this is a sole prerogative of the executive. The President is the architect of Philippine foreign policy. That, of course, has been his position.
Yeah, but this is a treaty, and treaties are supposed to have been, ratified by Senate.
But we don't have any new treaty.
Okay.
So there's been no new agreement.
So the review of this will be dependent on the executive alone?
Well, there'll be two types of review. Number one, you review the legal instruments, which is, of course, the Mutual Defense Treaty of 1951, which I think the Americans are not very happy with.
Okay.
Or you can review the context.
Yes, yes.
In which you discuss the treaty in the light, let's say, of new challenges.
Okay.
And from there, you come out with an exchange of notes. Like what happened with the Kenny-Romulo exchange of notes when they reviewed the Mutual Defense Treaty after 9/11, during the War on Terror.
2001,
when
2002,
they said, terrorism is not an armed attack.
Okay.
So it constitutes something new. So they have an exchange of note that they have to form a new body, the Security Engagement Board, that would tackle the threat of terrorism, because terrorism per se is not an armed attack by another state. So probably I see that review in that form, that they will discuss the new environment and, of course, probably come out with a communique stating that, in the light of these new developments, we're coming out with these measures. So there are the two ways of how they would review the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty.
And then we have this week or last week's visit by Secretary Mike Pompeo. So how do you look at that?
It's nothing new. Okay. It's nothing new.
What did he say?
First, he stated what is barely recognized provision of the Mutual Defense Treaty,
which is
what would trigger the what would be considered as an armed attack.
An armed attack. Okay.
Number one, of course, you have the armed attack on metropolitan Philippines.
Okay.
That's, of course, the Philippine territory. The second, of course, is armed attack on Philippine public vessels.
Okay.
land, air, or sea, anywhere in the Pacific, which is, of course, what he stated. Then the other statement pertains to that the South China Sea is part of the Pacific. And again, this is contained in the letter by Ambassador Thomas Hubbard in 1997.
Okay.
When we
okay.
were negotiating with the Pacific Forces Agreement. And during that time, Senate asked, is the South China Sea part of the Pacific? And of course, the American position, yes, it is part of the Western Pacific. So my analysis, this is not something new. It's just a reiteration of what has already been mentioned in the past.
So where do you think this is going? I mean, we have Donald Trump now, who's, he's America First policy. And then Duterte is in his third year. So where do you think this is going?
I think but of course you have to take into account this very important factor.
Yes.
The U.S.-China strategic competition.
Okay, so where's this
anything
going?
that would irritate China,
At this point,
the Americans will jump on it.
okay.
So last December, President Trump signed the Asia Reassurance Act.
What is that?
That the United States would focus on Asia, would strengthen its position in Asia, and the law basically states that China is a strategic competitor.
Yes.
That the United States should reaffirm all its alliances in the region. So we're getting the attention of the region is attracting the attention of the United States.
Do you think the return of the Balangig bells, is related to all of this?
Yes, in a way,
it
it's
sends a
trying to
statement.
send a signal to the Philippines. From the perspective of Washington, the alliance is very important because we are engaged in a strategic competition with China, which of course puts us in a dilemma. On the one hand, we have an ally or strategic ally that looks at our newly founded economic partner, China, as a competitor. So that really puts us in the middle, right in the middle of this brewing strategic rivalry between the United States and China.
So how should we act now? The Philippines,
Oh gosh,
where
we have
should
to
we
play
be?
it wisely. We have to play it wisely.
How is that?
We cannot simply lean on one power.
Yes.
But of course, we have an alliance with the United States. I think this is the point raised by Secretary Lorenzana.
Yeah.
And you hear this, especially from the former foreign secretary and from high-ranking officials of the Philippine government. Friends to everyone, enemies to none. Or independent foreign policy. You cannot have a genuine independent foreign policy if you have an alliance. You cannot be friends to anyone, enemies to none if you have an alliance. Because an alliance is just like marriage. It's a two-way street. The enemy of your ally is also your enemy. So that constrains your prerogative to exercise a genuine independent foreign policy. I think Secretary Lorenzana is in a way reminding the government we have an alliance. So we cannot simply announce to the world we are friends to everyone, enemies to none, because we have an alliance.
And do you think President Duterte is playing his cards well right now?
I think from his perspective, he couldn't care less about the United States. I think his heart is with the other party.
China.
You said it, not me. Your words, not mine.
Okay, we'll talk more about the different issues surrounding the Mutual Defense Treaty between the United States and the Philippines when Asean in Focus Weekend Edition returns.
Accurate and fair reporting. Not only from Batanes to Tawi-Tawi, but also abroad. Detailed and timely stories relevant to people all over the world. Catch all of these at Net25, your reliable source of news, entertainment, and technology updates.
Okay, we're back with our interview with Dr. Rene De Castro, Professor for International Studies at the De La Salle University, Manila. Dr. Rene,
Hello.
you mentioned earlier about the gray zone tactic. Can you explain more about this?
Those are measures that are used by China that doesn't actually constitute an arm attack for the first, primarily because they don't involve the Navy.
Okay, so
They
what are
involve
involved
the
here?
Coast Guard, they
The Coast
involve
Guard.
the fishermen,
The fishermen.
and they involve the paramilitary forces.
Okay.
And they don't actually apply force.
Okay, so the fishermen who are actually preventing our Filipino fishermen from fishing in their traditional fishing grounds
Yes,
are,
that's a form
are
of
part
gray
of
zone.
the gray zone
Or what
tactic.
China applied to us during the Scarborough Shoal standoff in 2012, when they confronted our Navy vessel, the BRP Del Pilar, with, I think, 2 civilian maritime surveillance units. So they're
Yes, yes.
white ships, they're not gray ships. And they're not supposed to fight a naval battle.
Okay.
They're supposed to assert China's sovereignty.
Are these Coast Guards?
That was
Not
before
necess-
China formed its Coast Guard.
Okay.
So they rely on the fisheries, the civilian maritime surveillance unit. So they deployed this.
Okay.
So this put us in a difficult position because we're not faced by the Navy. So it cannot be considered as an arm attack. And there is really no armed conflict.
Okay.
It's just a matter, China's position is we're simply asserting our jurisdiction because the South China Sea historically belongs to China. So we're not using the Navy. We're just applying civilian vessels. So this put us in a difficult position. Of course, behind those white ships, you would see the silhouette of the Chinese Navy.
Okay.
Of course, they could do it because China has the capabilities to do so. They have a huge paramilitary forces. Now they have, of course, a powerful Coast Guard backed up by a powerful Navy.
So these are on standby.
Standby,
Whatever
waiting.
happens. Okay.
So
Okay.
this really put us in a tight position. We could not say this is an arm attack, so we could not invoke the Mutual Defense Treaty. But on the other hand, you have coercion. You have diplomatic pressure being applied on the ground.
Okay, okay. And just about 2 days ago, there's this news report that the Filipino fishermen are being prevented from, I think, from landing at the sandbars in Pag-asa
Sandy
Island.
Cay, in
Sandy
the
Cay.
not very far. Yes, that's a form of gray zone tactic.
Okay, and you think China will continue to use this?
Yes, Jess. I think they're really preparing the Chinese Coast Guard and, of course, their huge fishing fleet to apply gray zone tactics, not only against the Philippines, but other claimant states, Vietnam, and they also use it against Indonesia.
Okay, okay.
They use a Coast Guard vessel to ram a Chinese fishing vessel that's being towed by the Indonesian Navy near the Tuna Island.
Oh, yeah, okay. We're familiar with that. Okay, before we go further, let's discuss about the MDT. Can you give us the historical, background of the Mutual Defense Treaty?
Actually, the Mutual Defense Treaty was signed by the Philippines and the United States in 1950. It was
1950.
ratified in 1951.
Okay, it was barely 4 years after they gave us independence in
Yes.
1946.
But when the Mutual Defense Treaty was negotiated and signed, the Americans were actually reluctant to have a Mutual Defense Treaty with the Philippines.
Why?
Because they had bases here.
Okay.
So the Mutual Defense Treaty was, before the Mutual Defense Treaty, you have already
The bases agreement.
bases.
Okay.
The 1947 military base agreement. The American position was, we already have American forces in the Philippines.
Yes, yes.
So you don't need any security guarantee from us because American forces based in the Philippines, based in Clark, Subic, and other American military facilities have the defense of your country as one of their tasks. So they said there's no need for a Mutual Defense Treaty.
Who insisted that?
It was during the time of President Quirino.
Okay.
This was during the time that the Philippines, along with other countries, were negotiating for the drafting of the San Francisco Peace Treaty.
Okay, what's
That will be signed with Japan. That will, of course, eventually return sovereignty back to Japan. So one of the conditions we asked, and the Americans, of course, agreed to, was number one, the reparation from Japan because of the war damages, and
Okay.
number two, a mutual defense treaty.
Okay.
That would provide security guarantee to the Philippines despite the fact that you have already American forces here.
So let's make it clear. The basis agreement is different from the mutual defense
Mutual
treaty.
defense treaty.
Okay.
The military basis agreement provides for allowing American forces 99 years
99
before
years,
it was, of course,
yes.
amended. By later.
They lasted
agreement.
there only how many years?
They lasted from 1947 to 1992.
Okay.
Because I think it was amended.
45 years, yes. Yes. It was
from,
shortened.
I cannot remember the exact
Okay.
agreement.
Okay.
So the assumption there, of course, was the fact that you have American forces and they're here to protect the Philippines. No need for any security guarantee until, of course, the 1950s.
Okay, so what are the components of the mutual defense treaty?
Number one, it provides, of course, both parties would strengthen their military capability. And, of course, the most important thing about this formal treaty guarantee is, of course, the promise to provide assistance, just in case you have an armed attack.
So far, they have not done that because there was no really occasion to do that.
There's no been a
Okay.
real case of armed attack against the Philippines.
Okay.
We tried to invoke the Mutual Defense Treaty during the 1960s, during the Sabah dispute.
Okay.
But the Americans said, no, you're the one who's basically committing an act of aggression by trying to annex Sabah.
Okay.
So you cannot invoke the Mutual Defense Treaty.
So what else are the activities? Of course, you have the conduct of joint military exercises. This is part of that. Okay, and then the military logistics support arrangement.
Visiting Forces Agreement.
Yes, yes.
Then you have the mutual logistics support. And another thing that's not mentioned in the Mutual Defense Treaty, and this is something I've been studying recently, is our formal treaty alliance with the United States also provides us a gateway to establish security partnership with other American allies.
Okay, okay.
Like, for example, the most important, of course, is the Philippine-Japan Security Partnership, the Philippine-Australia Security Partnership, and our security relations with South Korea.
South Korea.
They're all American allies.
Yes, yes.
So for them, there's no problem if we develop a security cooperation with another American ally. This is what you call spoke-to-spoke relationship.
Yes, yes. And another component is the assistance on AFP modernization. Do you think they really helped us in AFP modernization? Or did the MDT really resulted in that? That's why we have this, we're not really that developed in terms of military capability.
I think whether we modernize the armed forces of the Philippines, we should not rely on another country.
Okay.
This is basically a sovereign obligation.
But we have not done that.
We have not done it. In fact, the modernization program of the armed forces of the Philippines was a reaction to the withdrawal of American forces in 1992.
Yes, yes.
So the Philippine Senate even encouraged the armed forces of the Philippines to proceed with your modernization program because we expect the Americans to leave their bases. But of course, after the AFP came out with a modernization program, Congress reneged on the funding of the modernization program. So the first law actually lapsed in 2010 until the Aquino administration came out with another law extending the 1995 Modernization Act of the Philippines, or the modernization program of the Philippines. So, we cannot blame the Americans or any other countries for the fact that our armed forces it's our fault.
Okay.
We don't want to put our money where our mouth is. We talk about sovereignty.
Yes,
we talk
yes.
about independence, but they have to be backed out by a credible military capability, and we simply don't want to fund.
And then China came. Anyway. Okay. It says here, since 2011, the U.S. has provided material and technical assistance to Manila as it creates a comprehensive border protection program. What's this border protection
Number
program?
one, of course, are the 3 former U.S. Coast Guard cutters
Okay.
that has been given to the Philippines.
Former, so these are old ones.
Not as old as what the Philippine Navy has right now.
Beggars can be choosers.
They're relatively new. They're only 40 years old. In contrast to the ships that the Philippine Navy, most of the ships that the Philippine Navy currently possess from the Second World War. So, and the most important, of course, is the Coast Watch Center.
Coast Watch Center, National Coast Watch Center. What is
yes.
this? What is this?
It's here in Manila. That's where we monitor all maritime activities happening. It's being operated by the Philippine Coast Guard.
So, how do you describe now the alliance between the Philippines and
Well, it's
the
there,
US?
but it's not normal.
In the
Because you have
sense-
several voices
Okay.
in government regarding, what do we do with this alliance? Starting from the top, I think the president couldn't care less whether we have alliance with the United States or not, because I think his primary focus is, of course,
Yes,
the
yes.
money bag in the region. That's
Yes.
China.
Okay.
Then, of course, you have Secretary Lorenzana, who wants to review, amend, and possibly abrogate the alliance. And, of course, you have Secretary Locsin, whose position is if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Okay, so we have this MDT. And then going back to another related topic. So we drove out the US bases in
September 1991, when the
91.
Philippine Senate made that historic vote.
Okay, okay. And then after that, what came next?
America, of course, immediately the United States Navy implemented its one-year withdrawal plan.
Okay.
So the last U.S. Marine was withdrawn from Subic by November 1992.
Okay.
Then China started to move in.
Okay.
So by
So do you
1995,
think that the action of China was really related to the
in
pullout
a way,
of the
they
US?
noticed that
Okay.
you have a strategic vacuum
Okay.
in Southeast Asia.
That's normal in international relations,
That's
right?
normal in
Somebody has to fill in the vacuum.
Yeah, of course, that's China. At the time,
Power
China was,
relations.
of course, becoming economically ascendant, becoming confident. But in 1993, I remember the People's Congress of China,
China.
passed a law, basically coming out with the territorial waters, claiming the whole South China Sea. Then, of course, in 1995, the Philippine Air Force and Navy discovered Chinese structure on Mischief Reef.
Okay.
That's the beginning.
Okay. And then what are the next actions of the US and the Philippines in courting back, Philippines?
Now?
No, after the withdrawal of the US bases.
Oh, it was us.
Okay.
That's the time we
So you have
asked the United
visiting
States
force
for
agreement.
the visiting forces
Oh, okay.
agreement, at least. The negotiation had something to do with large-scale military exercises. The United States, we could not conduct large-scale military exercises if American forces are not given legal guarantee.
Okay. So we
Because-
gave them legal guarantee.
Yeah, the
through the
actually, the
visiting
visiting
force
forces
agreement.
agreement is just a legal guarantee.
Okay.
It's just another word for a status of forces agreement that expired when the bases were withdrawn in 1992. So it expired in 1994. At that time, the United States said no more large-scale military exercises. So that only resumed after the Philippine Senate concurred to the visiting forces agreement, I think around 1999.
Okay.
The negotiations took about 2 years. It took about 1 year for the executive to convince Senate to concur to the visiting forces
So
agreement.
it was really us who courted them back?
Yes, yes. I
Okay.
think both sides.
Okay, because they need us strategically.
Yeah, the position, they want to at least put boots on the ground in
yes.
Southeast Asia, because after the last U.S. Marine left Subic Naval Base in 1992, there's no permanent American military presence in Southeast Asia. You have a small facility in Singapore,
Okay.
but that's very small.
That's very small. Okay. And then EDCA.
EDCA was signed, of course, in 2014. The negotiations leading to EDCA was an offshoot of what happened at Scarborough Shoal.
Okay.
When President Aquino started to raise,
Yes.
again, are you with us or against us? The security guarantee. Again, the American position is similar to the position they had when the last American Marine was withdrew from Subic. How can we guarantee your security if we don't have access
To your
to your facilities?
facilities, yes.
Because the two nearest American military facilities are, number one, of course, in Okinawa. That's thousands of miles away. And, of course, you have Guam.
Yes.
So
yes.
even if they provide us that security guarantee, there's no way that they could react swiftly because of the distance, the tyranny of distance. So EDCA was supposed to provide temporary presence to American forces.
Temporary.
Presence, access.
But how temporary is temporary? That's the
We're
question
giving them,
always asked.
according to when the Supreme, this was challenged
Yes, yes, in the
legally.
Supreme Court.
Then, of course, the Supreme Court came out with a position saying EDCA is constitutional.
Constitutional.
After that, the Philippine government offered 5 Air Force
sites,
facilities
yes, yes.
that could be used for access arrangements.
So do you think we're right in courting back the United States?
We don't simply have the military capability. to face up against.
So it was a reaction, among others, with China's current actions.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, we will talk more on the different issues surrounding the RP-US Mutual Defense Treaty when Asean in Focus Weekend Edition returns.
It's time to take one step further and face the impossible. Time to search the unknown and fight for the truth. Time to overcome boundaries and connect the world. It's time for DW News.
Letters and Music, Lunes hanggang Biyernes, 1:00 hanggang 2:00 ng hapon.
Innovation, digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations, all face interesting challenges in the market today. Peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business every Saturday from 5 to 6 p.m. Open for Business, from vision to action. The elderly undeniably serve as a significant part of society as they impart valuable knowledge and life lessons that can't be learned from school. That's why they should not be neglected and forgotten. Through EBC Cares, their societal contributions were once again recognized and their wellness ensured. They received free medical and dental services, such as eye checkup, blood sugar and blood pressure check, ECG, and free medicines, vitamins, and health supplements. They also enjoyed availing themselves of free haircut and hairstyle, massage, as well as facial and skincare treatments, entertainment activities, and other freebies. At EBC Cares, elderly people are treated with respect and appreciation. We believe that they should be cared for, protected, and valued. EBC Cares, enabling a better community.
Landmarks, Linggo, 6:00 hanggang 7:00 ng gabi.
Okay, we're back with our interview with Dr. Rene De Castro, Professor for International Studies of the De La Salle University in Manila. Okay, Dr. Rene, where is ASEAN in all of this?
Well, the other Southeast Asian countries are watching developments here.
Okay.
Because you have to understand what I would consider the de facto ASEAN foreign policy. As a regional organization, ASEAN doesn't want Southeast Asia to be dominated by one single power.
Yes.
Of course,
Actually,
that single power is happened to be a neighbor in the backyard who has become, has the second largest economy in the world.
Some say it's the neighborhood bully.
Yeah, so the ASEAN position, I use the term equibalancing.
Okay,
the only way we could balance one bully is to bring another bully. so the other bully, of course, is
you have this local bully and you have the traditional global bully.
Bully from the Western Hemisphere.
Okay.
So and of course also the other power in Northeast Asia, that's Japan.
Japan, okay.
So ASEAN position is to try to bring in all these great powers so that they'll be watching each other and balancing each other. So from ASEAN's perspective, especially from maritime Southeast Asia, I'm talking about Singapore,
Malaysia,
Indonesia, Thailand, and even, of course, Vietnam.
Yes, yes.
For Vietnam, it is good that we have at least American presence here. Not in their backyard, but in our backyard, in the Philippines.
That's one thing. They want them here, but not in my... we want you here, but not in my backyard. How do you explain that?
That's national interest. It will, from them, it will, be very... It will undermine, diminish their sense of sovereignty. And traditionally, of course, among the ASEAN countries, there are only two countries that still have a formal security treaty with the United States.
Philippines.
The Philippines and Thailand. Like, of course, in the case of Thailand, it's inactive.
Yes, yes.
So it's the only one country that has a formal security alliance treaty with the United States, and that's the Philippines.
Do you monitor the official, statements of ASEAN on all of this?
No, ASEAN, as much as possible, would never come out with any public statement regarding American presence.
But they're just watching.
They're watching.
And they want American presence here in the Philippines.
In Southeast Asia, not necessarily in the Philippines.
Oh, okay.
So for them, I think there was a sign of relief when the Philippines signed the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement in April 9. I think they were kind of disturbed when our current president announced that he's separating from the United States.
And they were disturbed.
They were very much disturbed. And they're not very happy with the fact that the militarization of the South China Sea was never mentioned when the Philippines was the host for ASEAN in 2017. That's why in Singapore, again, the issue of the buildup of artificial islands and the militarization of the South China Seas were mentioned in the communique. So that's how ASEAN plays the game of great power.
So different
relations.
They're just watching.
They're
but
watching,
of course,
but they're concerned.
Yeah, but of course we see individual countries having their own reactions. For example, Indonesia, it has challenged China in the Natuna Islands. Is that okay? Is it?
Well, it's an indication. It's of the maritime Southeast Asians' suspicion of China. Malaysia, to a certain degree, especially after you have the return of Prime Minister Mahathir into power. Then Singapore always is very conscious of the changes in the regional strategic equilibrium. Then, of course, you have Vietnam.
Yeah, Vietnam.
Vietnam was being very clear. Vietnam had really made it a point to bring back the United States, to make sure that the United States remain as a power to reckon with in Southeast Asia.
Why can't we be like that?
I don't know.
Vis-a-vis China.
We still have the South China Sea as a buffer. But we should, that's part of our national interest. We should make sure that the South China Sea remains a buffer. And we should never allow a tiny, this is always mentioned by the Chinese Foreign Minister, Wang Yi, that there is the Philippines and China are very close neighbors.
Yeah.
I hope he's not talking about the 9-dash line. Because, if China would realize the 9-dash line, we will be really a very close neighbor of China. We
were in China last year, and we were shown, I think it's in Guangzhou University, they showed us this map with the ASEAN area, and it's not 9-dash line, 9-dash line, it was 10-dash line. I counted there were 10-dash lines.
So, we have to be very conscious that the South China Sea remains a buffer.
Okay.
A maritime and strategic buffer between us and China, so we could enjoy our degree of autonomy and, of course, our liberal democratic system. And, of course, more importantly, our right to worship.
Yes, of course. That's very important.
That's very important, the right to worship.
Now we have the Indo-Pacific, thing. So we have India now. So how do you look at this?
Well, you have basically recognition of India's role as a power to reckon with.
Where's India in the South China Sea conflict?
They're already sending ships, but they are not announcing. I think it was in 2012 they were disturbed by a Chinese warning to a Indian destroyer that was passing through Vietnam, threatening it and warning them that they're in Chinese waters.
So they're not necessarily neutral. They're trying to send a message.
In fact, they've been conducting freedom of navigation operations. And they've been conducting military exercises with the United States and Japan in the Indian Ocean.
In the Indian Ocean, but in the South China Sea.
But they're sending ships.
Okay. What's in their interest?
maintaining of the liberal international order, the rules-based international system, and ensuring that, of course, that they also return the favor to China, because China is also intervening in the Southeast Asia by buttressing its ally, Pakistan.
Okay.
So it's returning the favor to China by providing support to countries that are challenging China, Vietnam, and to certain, of course, and the Philippines before.
Okay, and then you have the other powers, Australia.
Of course, as an American ally to supporting the United States, maintaining the rules-based international system, as that's the term they use to maintain the status quo.
Okay, but it's actually containing China.
I will use the term constrainment.
So where do you think all of this is going?
We're going back to what they call a classic balance of power system.
Okay. So we have...
I hope that will remain that way, because if you have the breakdown in the balance of power system, that means war.
That means war, and we're not ready.
And we're in the middle.
We're in the middle.
We'll be in the middle.
So how strong should Asean be to, to assert its,
it should be cohesive.
Okay.
It should come out with a unified position. But I think...
Is it possible for ASEAN at this point to come up with a unified position?
I don't think so. Because geographically, ASEAN is divided between the continental Southeast Asian countries and the maritime Southeast Asian countries. And of course, since 2012, China has effectively divided ASEAN.
And actually, by 2020, China will be the world's biggest economy. So
that's a projection. We don't know whether that would really happen or not.
Or at least by 2050. So there will really be a change in world order. So
that's still to be remain to be seen. Don't discount the United States. The United States still has a source of technology, and the advantage, of course, of the United States vis-a-vis China is that the United States is not dependent on energy sourced from abroad. China is very much dependent from energy from abroad. So that's the advantage of the United States.
Okay, so so how should the Philippines then craft our our position on the Mutual Defense Treaty now?
Again, this is a point raised by Secretary Lorenzana, is that we have to understand review the context. But more importantly, I think Secretary Lorenzana is actually directing his message to us Filipinos, because we don't have the government, the Filipino nation doesn't have a single position regarding our alliance with the United States. And this is, of course, again, reflected in the slogans by the government. Independent foreign policy, friends to all, enemies to anyone. So it's reminding us.
When you say us, the Filipino people?
And of course, also in government.
Okay, so it's really the government. Okay.
The government.
So how should the next government, I mean, we have a midterm election this May. So how should Congress, and all the local government officials act now?
I think it's time probably for a discussion on how important the alliance to the Philippines.
So there should be more discussion.
Discussion, and at least come out with a general consensus on how important is our alliance with the United States.
So how do we engender the discussion? How do we promote that discussion?
I think it should be intelligent discussion.
Who should
it should
lead
not
that?
Be based on emotion.
Who should lead that?
I think the two leading government agencies, the Department of Foreign Affairs and the Department of Defense, possibly managed by the National Security Council.
Okay.
Because I think the president is, again, this is my take. I couldn't care less about the alliance with the United States. And we also have to think in terms of the future.
So what would be a good future for us, Philippines?
At least the region remains stable, and that we're able to take advantage of the this strategic competition between the United States and China.
So we really don't need to side with any one of them?
Being an ally of the United States is already an indication that we have to at least be leaning to one of the parties. Because we have a formal treaty ally with, formal treaty alliance with the United States.
So you're in fact advocating for the maintenance of that?
I think so. I think so.
It's in our best interest.
It's our best interest.
Even with China breathing down our neck.
Primarily, of course, also in terms of geostrategy.
Okay.
Your neighbors are not usually your best friends.
Yeah.
Plus, you have a territorial dispute with China. And more importantly, values.
Okay.
Values of liberal democracy. Okay. Values of rule of law.
Okay.
values respect for human rights, and more importantly, the freedom of worship.
Okay. Which, if we adhere closely to China, we won't have much of that.
Unless you want to be in a re-education camp, along with the Uyghurs in China, because they happen to be Muslims.
Okay. So, any final word on...
Again, there's a point. It boils down to values.
Yes, yes.
It boils down. Can we relate with the values of the United States, which of course
yes,
had been
yes, yes.
our colonial master
Masters.
for 15 years, and of course we have maintained close relations. It boils down to values.
Okay. Any final word on what to do with
Again,
the NDP?
it boils down to we should make it a point. This is that we should see our alliance with the United States not merely as a matter of necessity,
Okay, not just economics.
but a matter of choice.
Okay.
It's a matter of choice because we share something. We share common values with the United States. And those are the values I mentioned. I think it's very important, and I've emphasized it. Not only liberal democracy, human rights, respect for law, freedom of worship.
Freedom of worship. Okay. Thank you very much,
Thank
Dr.
you,
Rene.
thank you.
Thank you very much. And I hope you'll be with us in some of our future discussions in the program. Okay. That's all, folks. Thank you very much. That's all for now. I'm Kaloy Tabunda, and I'm one with 25.